All right, guys. So the S3 is out, and I'm getting people this. Looks great. It features the shot of the desert skeletons again, and definitely seems to imply that Carol kisses the new character. Yes, it does. Um, Laying Carol further to rest finally. That's one step to Bethel coming back. Yeah. Okay, so I can address that a little bit as we go on, but this is going to be maybe kind of a long video. I was trying to get this out yesterday, and I've been ridiculously busy for the last 3 days, so it just didn't happen until Sunday morning my time, and I'm going to record it, and then I'm just going to go ahead and upload it right away. Um, I'm going to go through the trailer scene by scene. I'm going to tell you what I'm seeing because in terms of the overall arcs, it is actually making me pretty happy. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the song too. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Okay, so I did my best to get most of the screenshots. I'm sure there's a few that I missed, but you know the ones that are jumping out at me is the most relevant. So we start with what we've already seen, them heading into London, basically. Then we just see several shots of them fighting walkers, trying to get places. They obviously get a little bit overwhelmed. And then they meet this gentleman. And Daryl asks where everybody is, and he says, "You're looking at him. I'm the last Englishman in England." And then he said something about a boat. The reason that he hadn't left yet is because he couldn't sail the boat by himself. So this does kind of answer the question as to how they get to Spain. Clearly, they go on this guy's boat, and I mean, we see them, leaving, and then they get caught in a storm. And then the boat is shipwrecked. And this is really interesting given some of the foreshadowing symbolism that we've seen in prior seasons, not just Daryl Dixon, but even in the flagship show. This always brings to mind. I believe it was the season premiere of season 9 or 10 when they were all doing maneuvers, like battle maneuvers on the beach, and there was a shipwreck there. This is what this reminds me of. And that was probably a foreshadow of everything to do with the spinoff and where they were going with things. We also do believe it's Beth symbolism to a great extent. But anyway, this is interesting. So they shipwreck. And then I didn't catch the closed captioning here, but one of them says, "I don't think this is Maine." So obviously they were planning to take this guy's boat, and he was going to take them all the way back to America in this boat. And that's actually pretty gutsy if you ask me. I mean, maybe there's some steps we're missing here, but this boat doesn't seem big enough to cross the entire ocean. So, but that's obviously what they were trying to do, and they get shipwrecked, and this is how they end up in Spain. And I do think that it's probably very significant, the shipwreck. They're using it as uh, symbolically, right? I mean, it happened with Daryl the first time. Now it's happening again. And anyway, I can get into that later. I don't want to go too much in the weeds of that. But the point is, they end up in Spain. And they end up in this town, right? This guy seems to be in charge for the most part. We get a shot of there's actually a lot of people living here. We see people dancing. They seem to be a fairly happy, thriving people. But they are also dealing with everything that everyone deals with. They need to protect themselves. They're still the walkers, all of that. Now, this is interesting. He says our town, I think it's supposed to be is under constant siege. I think the captions are wrong here. And we see these guys. We don't know who they are, but they look like pretty cool bad guys. They're wearing these bone masks. I assume that's from some like a ram's head, maybe. We've actually seen ram's head symbolism in the past, so that's interesting. But we don't know who these guys are. They're pretty scary looking. And it actually reminds me a little bit of the Reapers, just that they show up, under cover of night in these masks, and they're terrorizing the town in some way. We don't know exactly what's going on, but yeah, we've got some pretty cool bad guys going on here. Then we find out that this guy is the king, apparently, of Spain. And we find out that this town is they're basically doing a virginal sacrifice where they give one of their daughters over. We see her. And I'm assuming this is her father. He doesn't look young enough to be someone like that she's romantically involved in. I'm assuming this is her dad. And he doesn't want her to be taken, but she's being given as the sacrifice, right? And then, obviously Daryl doesn't think that's very cool. And he says, so this is what happens. You're giving one of your young women for guns. But clearly not everyone in the town is okay with it. This guy isn't. He says they call it security. I call it extortion. Um, Interestingly, this is where it shows the skeletons. Now, I want to point something out about this. This is obviously out of chronological order for the way the story is going, because this is Daryl in the desert, and obviously this isn't going to happen directly after he's having this conversation with this guy about security versus extortion. But I want you to notice a few things here, and I'll come back to this. I'm going to go through the trailer. I'll come back to this analysis in a minute because I don't want to get too off track. But these are the two skeletons, but I want you to notice that they're actually laying in a different positioning than we've seen before. We've seen the side by side is the biggest one. We've seen a few, like in the One More episode, which is the one with Aaron and Father Gabriel that Robert Patrick was in. We saw two skeletons that were like clasped in an embrace, like they had died completely in each other's arms. The side by side walkers are usually not quite that way. They're just lying side by side in the grass or wherever they're lying. But it reminds me of Daryl and Beth lying in the grass in Inmates. But these ones are a little bit further apart, and it looks like this one on the left of the screen is almost reaching toward this one. So I don't know. It feels a little more, I don't know, a little more vacant in some way, like they're not quite together, but they want to be, or they were together. And one of them, I mean, looking at the reality of this, of in the show, what happened with these two skeletons, they were two people who were walking across the desert and they didn't make it. At some point they fell down and they died, probably from thirst or heat stroke or something. And so one of them fell and the other one did, and they still died together, but not quite side by side, which is just kind of interesting. So I think part of the reason that we're seeing this with Daryl here is because he, at this point, is in the desert and he's got, something tied around his head. So he's obviously in need of water, in need of shelter and shade and all of that. So it's part of it's just like, okay, as though things aren't bleak enough, just so that you're probably going to die like these two did if you don't find some water, which is like, okay, well, thanks for that, Anyway, but we could tie that back to a lot of things. Obviously, there's the skeletons, there's the side by side. There's the fact that he's in need of water. And remember, during them, before the music box woke up, there was a major drought. So there's a lot of things we could point to here. But anyway, I think it's interesting. What I was really starting to say is that in terms of the way they show things in the trailer, which we do know, let me put this out there too, that very often in the trailer, things are spliced together in a way that makes them a little bit misleading. And might not end up being quite that way in the show. And so, always take it with a grain of salt. But at the same time, I do think that, whoever is creating the trailer, it's obviously sanctioned by the powers that be because it's the official trailer that's being put out. I think Gimple very much oversees it. And the way that they splice things together are, even if it's a little bit misleading in terms of what is happening in the show, literally in the plot, I think they splice things together in such a way as to give us an idea of what's happening, almost like on a mood level, like on an emotional level sometimes, or maybe on a thematic level. So I think it's interesting that we see this girl who's being given as a virginal sacrifice in exchange for guns. And we see her father being upset that she's being taken away. We see Daryl talking to this guy about it. And then it shows this. Okay. What does this have to do with that? Not a whole lot. Even though I think we'll get to chronologically, like probably where this falls in the story. But let me just say, I want to point those things out and then I'll come back to it. I think it's interesting that they put this here. And I think it's very, very intentional. Okay. So I will come back to it, I promise. Then we see that Daryl doesn't really want to get involved, even though he doesn't agree with it. And he says the thing about how maybe we should just try to get home, stay out of everyone's shit, which the way he says it makes me laugh. It's very Daryl. But Carol says, no, we can't just do nothing. And then they ask where the convoy is going, the one that took the girl. It's going to Barcelona. And then he says, do you have a map? And then, interestingly, we see Daryl take off on his bike without Carol. So again, because of the non-chronological nature of trailers, we can't be sure if this is exactly what it looks like, but what it looks like they're trying to tell us is that he goes after this girl to bring her back. And actually, based on some of the spoilers we've seen and the pictures we've seen, we've had pictures of her, that actress, on the back of his bike. I do think that is what happens. I think he goes to get her and bring her back, basically, to her father. And that's super interesting. Okay, that's making me really happy. There's been some, I don't mean because of like even what exactly is happening here in the plot. I mean, in terms of theme and Beth, and I'll get to that in a minute. There's been some question about, whether there's going to be a romance with her. I really don't think so. I'm not getting that vibe at all. I just think he's going to get her and bring her back. And that's very Daryl. Like, I'm actually really excited for the storyline. I think it's awesome. And the interesting thing, though, too, here is that Carol doesn't seem to go with him. I think Carol stays in the village, which is why we see him alone taking off on his bike. Okay, then we go to this. I said just last week that I really didn't think this was Daryl on the horse, and I 100% I don't think it's him now. I tried to get a clearer picture of this, but it's moving, and I can't get it any clearer than this. But this looks like a Spanish gentleman. I don't think this is Daryl. I think from behind it kind of looks like him, but it's not. I also want you to notice up here, see this train. So we've got these walkers. I'm pretty sure what's going on here, and you'll understand why in a later screenshot. This is very much Operation Lead the Walkers Away. This guy on the horse he's getting the walkers to follow him. And the walkers are chained to the train and they're pulling the train. So it's this whole thing where they're trying to pull the train and they're using the walkers as labor, but the walkers have to push forward and follow someone. So he's the person they're following. So it's very much like Operation Lead the Walkers Away in season 6. And we're going to see that train again in just a minute too. And we have Daryl looking down. He might be looking down into the gorge at the train, but I'm not sure. It doesn't really show for sure, so we're not sure what he's looking at here. In the world of the dead. Okay, so here we go. So you can see these walkers are all chained up. Interestingly, they're these look yellow, these bands that are on them. But it's also really important that they're walking along train tracks. Obviously, they're pulling the train, whatever's in it. Somebody's trying to transport it from one place to another. But the train tracks are a big symbol in The Walking Dead. And I'll talk about them a little bit more when I get to the song. So we see Daryl doing something with a gun, getting ready to kill somebody, probably. It's just very Daryl. They fight for the living. So then we see this town again. There's dancing. Everyone looks pretty happy. Then we see this. I'm not sure exactly when this falls. It might be when they first shipwreck, although the weather looks different, so I'm not positive that it is. But we have more water, more boat, that's seems to be shipwrecked. Then we have a walker that's got the barnacles on it. We've seen these come up out of the water before. I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. We could definitely talk about the ocean symbolism. It's very much like Oceanside was when we have these barnacle walkers. But I did notice watching this a couple of times, I'm pretty sure this is a male. It doesn't look like a female, although it's kind of hard to tell. But he's wearing a vest, which almost makes me feel like he's a representation of Daryl in some way. But we'll have to wait and see what's going on in this scene. Carol yells incoming here, and we see just this guy's eyes. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that it's not just a fireball, they're actually catapulting walker parts that are on fire. And, obviously there's just some sort of battle going on. We get some scary walkers. So here we go back to, I think, those villains, near the beginning of the trailer that were wearing the bone masks. You can't see this very well, again, because it's moving and it was hard to get a good shot, but there looks to be bone fragments. This almost looks like a skeleton here on the front of their truck. And they're coming in to the town. Then we see a lot of people running. I think these are the same people, the bad guys. You can see they've got bones on sticks, and this guy looks like he's wearing a mask. So they're invading the town in some way. And this guy, I don't know what's going on with this guy, but he's interesting. He's not exactly serious because he has lost both eyes rather than one, but I hardly even think that matters. He looks like, the funny thing is, just kind of on a personal note, a story that I'm writing it's a dragon fantasy and it has oracles. And their eyes aren't gouged out. Their eyes in the story that I'm writing, they tend to have skin that has grown over their eyes. But this is what it reminded me of. I was like, whoa, that dude could be like right out of the story that I'm writing. Anyway, he seems to have had both of his eyes gouged out, but he just seems like he would be kind of oracle-like. I don't know what's going on here, but that's really interesting. I saw him and I was like, whoa, what's going on there? I want to know what that's about. But it's definitely got a serious feel to it because of the eyes. Then we have these guys coming into the town. They're on bikes. I don't know if these are town members that are good or if this is like another enemy that's, I don't know. We don't know what's going on, but they're coming in on dirt bikes here. Okay, so I said that we would come back to the train. I tried to take slow motion like screen captures of this, and it's just really hard because it's moving too fast. But that train that I showed you in the gorge, that the train car that they're pulling along with the walkers, at some point, Daryl gets on top of it and tackles one of the guys that's on top of it. So this is him from behind, And then at first, actually, when I first saw it, I was thinking this might be co-drawn, but actually I don't think it is. It's blurry, but it doesn't look like him when I actually look at it up close. Anyway, but this is Daryl tackling MC. It looks really funny to watch Daryl tackle someone in slow motion, but it looks really cool when you're watching it at normal speed. Anyway, so then we get this shot. So you can see that this is the top of the train, and the walkers seem to be like pounding on the train now. So at some point they came back to it, and you could actually see this yellow thing in the other shot from the front, although it seemed to be hanging off the front. I don't know what it is. It almost looks like an unzipped suitcase or something, but it's very yellow. This guy's pants are yellow too, so there's definitely a yellow theme going on here. And then combined with the train, I mean, I'm definitely side-eyeing that in terms of just the colors and the symbolism and everything. But it'll be interesting to see what's actually going on here. We don't know why Daryl's tackling this guy or what's happening, but it's interesting. So then we see more battle. I mean, this guy's got a freaking minigun, geez. But they're shooting clearly. And then I'm pretty sure they're shooting walkers. It looks like walkers have gotten into the town, like they broke through. And of course, there's the fire and everything, so they're taking down the walkers. And then here we say the captions are a little bit off when I'm watching it on YouTube. So this is actually where Daryl says we have to fight them, and he kind of makes a motion with his hands, and that's because these people probably don't speak English. So he's trying to communicate with them when they don't actually all speak the same language. It has been said that this may be a leper colony based on how these people look. And I almost wonder, because it's not that you would really equate these things in real life, but the leprosy actually reminds me of the barnacles on that walker. So I almost wonder if the walkers with the barnacles that are coming up out of the ocean are meant to be a foreshadow of the leper colony or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching with that, but visually they look similar. Okay, somebody pointed this out to me earlier too. This clock, this is the King of Spain. They're just walking into this building, but this clock says 5:10. And now that's really close to when Beth woke up at Grady. She did not wake up at 5:10. She woke up at 5:17. And so we're really kind of side-eyeing the numbers there. Could it be, and this is what W.D. Way came up with, could it be that they're showing how close we are to Beth because it's 5:10 and she woke up at Grady at 5:17? And we're super, super close to that, right? Could be that. I mean, the 7 minutes is important. In fact, I want to say, and I would have to go back and check this, I want to say that 7 minutes passed on the grandfather clock in still from when they saw it to when it started chiming. Don't quote me on that for sure. It might not have been, but even the point is the 7 minutes, that it's exactly 7 minutes. I'm kind of side-eyeing that too. But we're really not going to know for sure, or at least, not that we ever know for sure if we're right, but I want to know what's going on in this scene, because as we're seeing this clock, this is the guy that they're saying is the King of Spain, and Daryl saying we've got to kill the next King of Spain, as he's walking into this building, and we're seeing this clock. So, I mean, it's being intentionally put into this scene for some reason. And so to get a better read on it, I would need to know what's going on in the scene, and I don't. But I don't know, it really gives me Dawn vibes in a way. I'm just kind of thinking about the line that Gorman said when he said someday there's going to be someone else in charge and it's not going to be her. And I've always thought that was a foreshadow that Beth would be in charge. So if they're killing the next King of Spain, does that mean she's going to be the next leader? I don't know. That's just kind of, I'm mashing things around in my head trying to figure out what they're trying to say with this. But again, I'm not going to get a really good read on it until we know what's going on in that scene. But it's really interesting. They do put a lot of emphasis in the trailer on this King of Spain, even though we don't really see him say much or, like converse with Daryl or Carol very much. So there he is again from the front. He looks mighty chipper, doesn't he? So then we just get a bunch of scenes of either battles or stuff going on in the town. This is that dragon that they burn. We know that they have a kind of a festival around it. This guy, yeah, I mean, you guys are right. It does definitely look like she kisses him more than it did in the teaser, so I'll give you that. Be interesting to see where they go with this. And I mean, as to why they would do this, I still don't really think that this is going to be a major romance for her, maybe for this season, or even the duration of the spinoff. But I still think overall that she's going to return to Ezekiel at some point. So yeah, but I mean, it's not like she hasn't had these romances before. She was with Tobin for a while, and I think it'll be something more like that, more of a short-term thing. Are they doing it in order to definitely, you know, even further push away the idea of Daryl and Carol? Yeah, probably. I could definitely get behind that. That's why they're doing it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm actually interested to see what this is and how this plays out. So um, then we have this. This is interesting. I'm not sure what's going on here either, but this is Daryl in the mask. He's wearing this kind of creepy looking mask. But then we see these walkers that have been turned into marionette dolls, which is creepy. But notice too that there are actually people in the audience watching this. It's weird. It's like they're actually putting on a play with walkers on strings, and people are watching that as though it's entertainment. Like that's all kinds of creepy. So I'm assuming that Daryl is sneaking around in here somewhere and he's got the mask on just to conceal himself or so that people will think he's part of the production or something. Yeah, but interesting. Like that seems so, the setting is so different than anything else we see in the trailer. So I'm wondering what's going on there. Then we see this guy, we've seen a picture of him before. People were trying to translate what is written on the wall here a little while back. He seems like he's a little crazy. He's definitely like not looking very friendly. And then we go into I'm actually really excited for this. I think this is such a cool idea that we go into this motorcycle duel. It really is like uh, a duel at a tournament that they used to do in the Middle Ages with swords, only they're on motorcycles and they have guns. You know, that's the only difference. So we see this guy, and he's that same guy who was just standing there. Clearly, he's not somebody who's friendly with Daryl because they're going to duel here. So we see him going, we see Daryl going. You can see this guy here in the background. Daryl like flips his gun around. So it looks like they even maybe go at each other more than once and then turn around and go again. That's kind of what this reminds me of. We see them coming really close and then close up, and when we hear what sounds like a gunshot, but obviously we don't really see what happens. So that, I think that's going to be a really cool sequence. Then we see Carol talking to this guy again. And so during this part, she says to him, and it's kind of a voiceover for the whole end of the trailer. First, you survive what happened to you, and after a time, if you're lucky, you start living again. So that's a theme that we've already seen and heard a lot about, but I will say that seeing a few clips come out of Comic-Con, Norman has talked about that as being a big theme for the season. That and, you know, a better way to live, start living again. Don't just always be running and fighting and all of that. And then it's even got the luck in there if you're lucky. So it's got the luck theme in there. And then right here at the end, it just shows the two of them. And he says, let's keep doing that. Let's keep never giving up. And that's the whole trailer. So let's see. All right, so let's talk about what I'm seeing overall in the arcs. Like I said, it is making me pretty happy. So clearly this season is going to have its own story, which we already kind of knew, that isn't necessarily including Beth. It's this whole thing with the town and them giving up their daughters and this whole thing. And I mean, to be fair, everything we see in the trailer could only be, you know, 2, 3, 4 episodes. It doesn't mean that we're seeing everything that happens throughout the season, but obviously there's a lot of it. But like I said, I'm actually kind of excited for the storyline. I think it's pretty cool. The first thing that occurred to me when I started thinking about this is that we have a girl who is taken and Daryl goes to get her to bring her back to her father. And that just really gave me like Herschel vibes. And I know that when Beth was taken to Grady, you know, Herschel had already passed away. But even so, I mean, Daryl would have seen it as going to get her and bring her back to her family, which would have been Maggie and everybody in Team Family. But he would have been doing it at least partially for Herschel because he, you know, they've established very clearly in Still that he had a lot of guilt over what happened to Herschel. So he would want to bring her back safely because he would feel like it was, you know, his duty to do that, you know, for Herschel to keep his daughter safe, which isn't necessarily a thing, but it's just how Daryl would feel about it, you know. So having this girl get taken and having Daryl go after her to bring her back, again, I really don't think they're going to do any kind of romance thing with her, but it still has Beth vibes. It still has let's go find her and bring her back kind of vibes, right? And obviously, as I said, he's not too keen to get involved. And then Carol says we can't just not do anything. And so he's basically Carol's, I would say nudging him, but also, you know, kind of bullying him into helping. And that really gave me Consumed vibes. So there's this one part that always sticks out in Consumed, and I always just thought it was very much a foreshadowing. And really, what we could be seeing in this season may be the fulfillment of this foreshadowing. So there's a part in Consumed where they meet Noah, and Daryl doesn't like him very much because he tried to take their weapons and everything. And Noah ends up getting trapped under a big, heavy bookshelf, and there's a walker crawling toward him. And Carol wants Daryl to help him, and he says no and walks away. And then Carol kind of does, fine, I'll help him then, and she goes back to get him. But then Daryl comes back and shoots the walker and does end up helping him. And he only does that because Carol wants him to. He's not doing it because he wants to. So that's what this reminded me of. He doesn't really want to get involved, and it's not because he thinks it's all right or anything. He just doesn't really want to get involved. But because Carol kind of bullies him into it and says, no, we got to do something, we got to help, then he gets involved, right? And when you really think about this, this is the thing that I think jumped out at me the most, that's making me the happiest about this, is that Noah knew where Beth was, and he really became their link to Beth. Not only did he tell them, that he confirmed for them that Beth was at Grady and that he knew her, but he went with Daryl after that, and because of him, they knew where they were in the hospital, they knew the layout, they knew what was going on, they kind of knew what to do because they had an insider, because they had Noah, right? Now, I don't know if this girl that Daryl is going to rescue is going to be exactly, that, but I can see structurally that something about him saving this girl could lead to Beth. And that would be a complete fulfillment of the foreshadowing in Consumed. So I was watching this going, oh, this is making me happy. Yeah, I'm liking this. Okay. So I'm just going to read you some of this that I sent to my fellow theorists. So after saying that, it leads me to the overall structure I've been thinking about. And I can pull, Daryl Dixon season 1 and 2 into this as well. So think about it this way. In Daryl Dixon season 1, Daryl woke up in a strange place in France and had to figure this place out. And he kind of did that over season 1 and 2. It was really both season, figuring out France, figuring out what was going on at the nest, and trying to almost find his place there, even though he was always trying to get home. And of course, that parallels to Beth waking up at Grady and having to figure out the dynamics there. The whole time she just wanted to leave and get back to her family. Ditto Daryl in France. He's trying to get home, right? So we have this parallel between their two arcs. At Grady, Carol suddenly showed up there, surprising Beth. And at the end of season 2, Carol shows up in France, surprising Daryl. We could even equate Isabel and Noah in this way. Granted, there was a romance thing with Daryl and Isabel, and it never felt quite that way with Beth and Noah. Some people thought maybe there was a little bit of a romance vibe there, but it certainly never went anywhere. But still, in both cases, both Daryl and Beth grew close to people that they met in this place they woke up in. And these people were people who were already there and who they came to care about. And in both cases, planned to take them with them when they left. Now, there is some debate about that with Beth and Noah. The fact that Noah said that she wanted to take him home and she never actually said that. And I get that. But the point is, Beth and Noah were going to escape together, right? And then he would have gone with her and whatever would have happened afterward. But similarly, Daryl was going to take Isabel and Laurent with him when he left. So there are still really strong parallels there. So now we have a situation where Carol wants Daryl to help someone and he doesn't really want to, but he'll do it for Carol and also because it's the right thing to do. And helping Noah led directly to them figuring out where Beth was. So I'm assuming helping this girl will also lead Daryl to Beth in some direct or indirect way. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing structurally. And if we go back to, so I was talking about how it was really interesting that they put this where they did in the trailer. So just to recap real fast, let's go back a little bit. We have them explaining that they are giving one of their daughters in exchange for guns. And we see her, her family being upset that she's being taken. And then Daryl talks to this guy. They call it security. I call it extortion. The next thing it shows is this. So if this is kind of a Beth foreshadow, and we've always assumed it is because of the side-by-side thing, and that's always been very tangled up with Beth symbolism. We have, just to review, we actually have them lying side by side in the grass in Inmates. And then the next big one was Always Accountable, which had so much Beth symbolism in it, and we had him laying next to a walker whose face was covered. So there was that, and then we've seen it a few other times too in other situations. So it's just interesting that it's like, okay, this girl is taken, her family's upset, and even before it shows him go to look for her, it shows this, like he's looking down at these two skeletons, which we're assuming one is a man and one is a woman. And I don't even know exactly what they're trying to say there, but it's like, almost like a blinking foreshadow sign or something. And maybe if he doesn't go get this girl, he's going to die in some way, and not even necessarily a physical way, but it's, an emotional sort of thing. But it also could be like the writers hinting that, if rescuing this girl is going to lead him to Beth, then not going to get her, obviously that would be disastrous for his finding his happy ending, right? So the point is, it's like hinting that he needs to go looking for this girl, and there's a romance thing involved, and there's like a death thing involved in it. You know what I mean? It's just really, really interesting to me that they put this here. It's so random if you don't understand the symbolism to put that there. And then we keep going to, oh yeah, by the way, we can't just not do anything. Okay, well, where's the convoy going? It's going to Barcelona. Okay, you got a map, and there Daryl goes. You know what I mean? And right in the center of that, they put the him looking down at the skeleton. So anyway, just really interesting, and it's really making me happy, and I'm feeling really good about this season. Um, what else have we got? I was going to say we don't really know where that falls in the chronology of the season, him looking down at the skeletons, because at some point he does look like he's stuck out in the desert and he doesn't have water, and he's, so I'm not sure where that falls based on what we see in the trailer. But again, we're not obviously seeing everything from the whole season in the trailer. So let's now go to talk about the song just briefly. Some of you may have recognized this song, and the funny thing is, they've used this song in plenty of other TV shows. I just recently, I was rewatching an episode of Supernatural where they used it, so it was funny that then the trailer dropped and they were using the song, and I was going, oh, we just listened to this on a different show. Now, the one they use in the trailer is obviously a Spanish version, but other shows would have used the English version. So here are the lyrics. I'm going to read through them. It's called House of the Rising Sun by the Animals from 1964. There's a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. Dear God, I know I was one. My mother was a tailor. She sewed my new blue jeans, and my father was a gambling man way down in New Orleans. And the only thing a gambler needs is a suitcase and a trunk, and the only time he's satisfied is when he's a drunk. Oh, mother, tell your children not to do what I have done, to spend your lives in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun. I got one foot on the platform and another on the train, and I'm going back to New Orleans to wear that ball and chain. There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. Dear God, I know I was one. And then I know I was the one. So, I mean, feel free to look this up and the different, what it means in the lyrics, but really it's a song about, um, I guess vices, but like destructive habits, destructive paths. So the house in New Orleans is where they're going to gamble, basically, it sounds like. But, that's literally what it's saying. Figuratively, the gambling could be anything that is destructive or dark, or just something that's going to kind of take away your happiness and your potential and all of that. So if you think about it as a gambling house of some kind, it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. I know I was one. My mother was a tailor. She sewed my new blue jeans. My father was a gambling man way down in New Orleans. So his father was a gambler, and the only thing a gambler needs is a suitcase and a trunk. And the only time he's satisfied is when he's drunk. So, he travels, he doesn't stay in one place because he's never got any money because he always gambles it all away. And the only time he's happy is when he's drunk. He can't be happy any other time because he has this like addiction to gambling, right? And then he says, tell your children not to do what I've done. The thing that really jumps out at me here is the train analogy here. I've got one foot on the platform and another on the train, and I'm going back to New Orleans to wear that ball and chain. So that suggests that he is actually getting on the train to go become a gambler. So he's headed toward this really destructive future. So this is really, it's not a happy song. It's more of a cautionary tale kind of thing. And the thing that just I was thinking about is that if you think about the gambling as being a figurative death of some kind, um, death of happiness, death of life potential, death of like doing anything with your life, that sort of thing. The train is taking him there. And I thought about that and I said, yeah, the train tracks in The Walking Dead are very often something that lead to death of some kind. I mean, look at Terminus, right? And we always say that, I mean, I don't know that I've ever actually explained it this way before. We always say that everybody in season 4 followed the tracks to Terminus except Beth and Daryl. And then Daryl did follow them when he met up with Rick and Michonne again. But with Beth and Daryl, they were on them for a minute. Like we see them kind of on the train tracks, but they cross over them. So Beth is the only one who didn't follow the tracks into Terminus, really. And that could be very symbolic. If there's, quote unquote death at the end of those tracks, she crossed over that. She didn't, it could be, all I'm saying is it's maybe another foreshadow that she's going to escape death because she didn't follow the tracks to terminus. Um, and not that all of them died literally or anything, obviously, but anyway, so very often the train tracks, like there's death at the end. And then we see in the trailer, we see lots of walkers. We see a lot of walkers around train tracks too, which is another, symbolic example of death around train tracks. Anyway, so why would they use this song for the trailer? It suggests that they're heading towards something destructive. Um, and it could very well have to do with, the fate of this town. And if they're allowing people to come in and take their daughters in exchange for ammunition and security, that's, that's not a good thing. That's not a very healthy thing. So it could mean a lot of things, but I do think that the songs are chosen to mostly mirror the internal arcs of the characters more than the action that's going on in the show. So this is just interesting that, I guess what I'm thinking is that, well, here, I was kind of hashing it out while I was writing it the other day. So the song is about being imprisoned to a vice. I think we could equate it to Daryl always getting caught up in other people's battles and helping them. He just can't seem to get away from that and live his own life. But I feel like it's leading him toward his destiny. And it really doesn't seem like a good thing in the song, saying one foot on the platform and another on the train is going to take him to a life of self-destructive vices. So it's a cautionary thing, something that we really shouldn't want for him. And even in TWD, the train tracks often lead straight to death, i.e. terminus. But even if this particular plot train leads him into a dark place, I still do think that Beth is going to be waiting for him at the end of the line. So try to think of it like this. Like it sounds, I'm not trying to say that Beth is death for Daryl, like that's not what I mean. But if he thinks she's dead, and this is leading him toward quote unquote death, someone that he thinks is dead, you see what I mean? Like symbolically that it could be something like that. But either way, we saw train tracks in 509 in Tyrese's Beth, his death hallucination, and Beth was there, right? So we saw them there, and I always say that I think they represent her pathway in a lot of ways because it's like disappearing into the trees where we can't see it. But I suppose another way to interpret it might be that she's going to be at the end of the train tracks, or that maybe the train tracks in that case were more about Tyrese and leading to his death. But again, Beth was there. So it's just interesting. We have these instances where she is very much tangled up in the train track symbol. And not only do we see train tracks in this season in a big way, but we have this song that has a reference to getting on a train and it leading toward death. And so it's just super interesting. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, this is a fun song. I've listened to it a lot now because I've been watching the trailer over and over again to get these screenshots. But like I said, this is making me very excited for the season, and I really like where it's going, and I think this is going to be a really, really fun season. And here's hoping we see Beth at the end, but either way, I do think it's still leading to her. So I would love to hear what everybody else thought. That is my analysis for today. I will go through your asks. I know we had some other stuff come out of Comic-Con that I want to discuss that are really interesting. I have not seen the full panel yet. If anybody has a link to it, please send it to me. But usually it gets posted on YouTube, a few days or a week after Comic-Con. So I'm assuming it just hasn't been posted yet. So yeah, I'll be back in a few days with a little bit more, but would love to hear everyone else's take on the trailer and what you think. And yeah, overall, I'm just super excited. This is making me super happy. So talk to you guys soon.